Speaking of paying for things, I'm sure you're very aware of the Buffett Rule and the changes in the tax code that the President and mostly the Democrats in Congress have been proposing and espousing. And what are your thoughts about the Buffett Rule and this change in taxes, and especially for those who are managing hedge funds and earned over $1 million a year and have ended up paying a tax rate of about 15%, whereas a lot of their workers and manufacturing companies might pay 28 or 30% tax rate. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I know we all know it grew out of Mr. Buffett, Warren Buffett's realization that his secretary was paying a higher effective tax rate than he was,
yes.
And how fundamentally unfair that was.
Yes.
So I'm a strong supporter of the Buffett Rule,
yes.
which it would apply to anybody who makes $1 million and over,
yes.
and would say that that person's effective tax rate could be no lower
yes.
than 30%. I mean,
yes.
I think it addresses, we know the growing income gap between the wealthiest of Americans.
yes.
Nobody quarrels with people's right to be successful. That's
yes.
who we are.
Yes.
But our tax system has to be fair, and I think the Buffett Rule tries to address one of the fundamental unfair aspects to it today.
Yes, thank you. Well, another item in the news quite a bit in the last few weeks is same-sex marriage or equal marriage. What are your thoughts about that? And I saw President Obama came out about a week or two ago and said he's in favor of equal marriage now for everyone. And what are your thoughts about that, Congresswoman Tsongas?
Well, it was great to see him come out. His personal support for same-sex marriage. Massachusetts has led the way on this issue, as it has on so many things. My husband Paul, actually, as a United States Senator, was the first to file legislation to address discrimination in the workplace based on sexual identity.
Yeah.
That was in 1979. So change comes slowly sometimes, but it's great to see that we've moved ahead on repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yes.
I was invited to the signing ceremony for that. I was so happy to be there. Congressman Marty Meehan held the first hearing on repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, soon after it was a policy put in place by President Clinton. So our 5th District has provided quite a lot of leadership around this issue.
Yes.
But there's still much work to be done, and I'm committed to moving ahead and making sure we have equality across this country, regardless of sexual identity.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, another very big issue in our country right now are the wars that we are in the middle of. I say wars because we're just getting out of Iraq, but I understand we still have thousands of support personnel there still in Iraq, and it's still quite an unstable country. And we have thousands and thousands, maybe over 100,000 still in Afghanistan, with the president stating that by mid-2013, all of the main combat operations are supposed to be led by the Afghanistan troops, and we should be out of there to a great extent by 2014. What are your thoughts about this? And I understand the American people would like to see us withdraw from Afghanistan and the combat operations in a much quicker fashion than what the president is even proposing.
Well, I'm glad to see he's put in place, our president has put in place a timetable. I think it's very important. I, for one, share the view that I'd like to see a more aggressive timetable than that which has been put in place. But I've been to Afghanistan 4 times as a member of Congress. My last visit was a year ago. And I think tremendous progress has been made in training the Afghan National Security Forces and the Afghan National Police. They are not at the level of professionalism that we see in our military or in our police force, in our community police forces. But tremendous strides have been made, and I think it's appropriate that we begin to ask those forces to be responsible for securing the safety of their citizens and for dealing with the many security challenges they face. So
yes.
I'm appreciative of the timetable. In my last visit, we focused on our women soldiers who are serving over there, and it's remarkable, despite the fact that officially they are not allowed in combat. In reality, they are in combat. The nature of the war means it's very hard to draw a line and say, here's the war, and then here's you're away from the front. That's not the nature of this conflict. So our women are fighting just because of the job they do. It puts them in harm's way. But we also met, and we wanted to go to thank them.
Yes.
And thankfully,
Yes.
the military, the Defense Department and the Army are now opening up many more slots, sort of officially, to women serving, and their service will be recognized. And I, for one, think when we are in combat, women are in combat,
Yes.
that they should receive recognition for the role that they are playing.
Yes.
But we also went and visited with many Afghan women. And we went to a school, for example, that was in a small town near the Pakistan border. And it was a school, they had 2 classes a day, two sessions a day. 1,000 young girls were cycling through that school in a given day. Now, their families are sending them to school knowing that the Taliban does not want to see young girls educated. They're putting at risk their families, in some instances, these young girls, and nevertheless, they desperately want to go to school.
Yes.
And we met with some young girls in one of the high school classes.
Yes.
And we said, well, what would you like to do when you're out of school? And they said, oh, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher,
Yes.
I want to be a journalist. They wanted to do all the things that our daughters want to do as a result of their education.
Yes.
So my fear is that as we withdraw, which I think is appropriate, we've been there 11 years, we're
Yes.
spending billions of dollars a month, and we are borrowing every dollar
Yes.
that we spend over there. I think it's time to conclude our combat effort over there,
Yes.
but I remain very concerned that we don't walk away from the gains that have been made for women and children in particular, particularly around education, access to better health care, maternal
Yes.
care. So that will be a function of our diplomatic effort and future aid, that we really do hold the Karzai government or any future government responsible to treating women on, recognizing women, extending them the rights that all Afghan citizens have.
Yes, Congresswoman, that's a concern that I think many Americans have, that what is going to happen when the United States leaves Afghanistan? Will it just revert to some sort of tribal warfare, Taliban maybe taking control again, women losing their rights again, and girls not being able to go to school again? Wouldn't that be a tragedy after having invested over a dozen years and many lives and many billions of dollars to see that happen? But there's a great fear, I think, with many of us that may in fact happen. So I was just watching a talk show on Sunday morning, and one of the Senator, Lindsey Graham, mentioned he's thinking it would be good to have residual force there in Afghanistan to try to, in the background kind of, at least take care of some of these Taliban hotspots, you might say, if they're trying to take control of the government militarily and just kill the Afghanistan leaders. Any thoughts about that, about some sort of residual force, or somehow so that we could retain the gains that we have helped Afghanistan make in the last 11 years?
Well, I think our effort, I believe our effort has to be on the training, the future and continued training of the Afghan National Security Forces, so that they become ever better, ever more professional and capable of dealing with those issues themselves. I think Pakistan's role is very, very important in the future, that they understand the threat that's posed to their stability, and that they take all the appropriate steps to control the Taliban and whatever Al-Qaeda may remain, especially in the Fatah area. That's the area between Pakistan and Afghanistan. I think we have to use our diplomatic efforts very strongly to hold the Karzai government to these standards we set, and we do have future aid. I don't think we should just withdraw all aid. I think but I do think there may well be a role for some caveats associated with that aid, that it remains very important in terms of helping that country regroup and stabilize. But it won't come without some thoughts as to what's appropriate in the future, especially around women and girls.
Yes, thank you. Well, one of the costs of the wars have been post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder, but I don't like to use that term, disorder. I understand that the military is going to try to change that. A lot of our military are coming back with that, and I personally think that everybody who has been in war and in combat comes back with that syndrome, and that